Hi, this is Junaid. Today I'm going to bring you Saira Kalia, which is the Assistant Program Director for University of Arizona for the program of psychiatry. She's well known in psychiatry and she has been featured on multiple TV channels for her and speaking gigs that she does around the country. And most important achievement for her is that she's my sister. So we're going to have so much fun. That's not your most important achievement?
That is not my most important achievement. And frankly, I don't think it counts as achievement either.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I got that. I understand 100%. So this is going to be a casual sort of talk, and one of the things I wanted to bring to the viewers who were here, especially the upcoming resident applications this year, is that what does the program think? What is their process of evaluating the residency applications right from the get-go? Like when they receive their applications, then how they select for interviews, how they select match for ranking, etc., and then go from there. So this is going to be sort of a timeline, a casual talk between two siblings, and then, go from there. We're going to do some myth busting, and let's just start with the first one, right? So Saira, if I send you a CV, that person gets into residency right away, right? No questions asked.
I feel like if you send me a CV, I'm probably going to be like, why? But I think that is a good question anyways, in terms, because I get a lot of that. Like a couple of our applicants or med students will be like, well, if the dean says something, you're obviously going to take this person or whatever. No, not really. Nobody ever, I thought so when I became associate program director. It was my first season. I was like, the dean says, I have to really, nobody cares. They're like, look at the person. You will get applications that somebody will say, to have a look at. But nobody really has twisted ever my hand to say, you must accept this person or you must even interview this person. I've had scenarios where we've had people say, please consider this application, but nobody's ever said you've got to give them an interview. And if they have, that's really not anything that I have to do. And I don't think that necessarily happens. There's definitely qualified candidates that'll come through, but at the end, you're going to treat every application the same way.
Awesome. Perfect. So let's start with the selection process then. So let's say September 29th, I think this is the deadline for the applicants to go. And I'm assuming you're not going to start downloading applications. You take a week or so then what's the next step really? Like as an associate program director, what do you do next?
We do not take a week. And I don't think a lot of programs will take a week because when you look at and I think one of the big sources of information for applicants is the Nrmp Survey. So there's a PD survey for 2020 on the Nrmp website, and you can kind of take a look and you can filter it by specialty. But you will see that most specialties are going to start sending out their interviews within October. And it is competitive, right? From a program perspective, also it's competitive. So we will look at the number of hits we get within the first day or two and then start kind of filtering whatever your particular filtering criteria is and look at it. So one of the things I always tell my med students is make sure you're on time. Like maybe a day or two late, but that's it. We get the bulk, and I mean the bulk, like 95% of our applications within that first 2 or 3 days. So really, there's not a lot of reason to go back in. I mean, we have like a set timeline in terms of we're going back in and rechecking in case something, somebody else came through or another application came through, but the bulk will hit within the first 2-3 days. So we get an average of 1,200 applicants a season. Probably 1,100 of them are there by the first day 2, day 3.
Awesome. That's good to know. So the first key thing is to understand that there should not be any delay. So now let's see they downloaded the applications and then supposedly, I think you have 7 spots in your residency program or 4, I forget.
12.
You have 12 spots in your residency. So how many applicants do you generally get? How many do you select for interviews? And how do you select them?
We get about 1,200 applications for 12 spots. We interview 10 per spot. So we're aiming to get about 120 interviews in. That's generally the formula among psych residency programs, that they tend to interview 10 per spot. So you're looking at about 120 applicants that you are going to interview. And so when it comes to saying these are the 120, what we come down to is we pick like 130 people that we're going to interview, and then people drop out or you pull an extra day if there's an excellent candidate or something. So I think that piece, and then we're pretty much reviewing at least 700-800 applications to go through. there's certain applications that you will not review necessarily because of some, they've failed multiple step, like there's criteria that you're going to be like, I'm not touching that application kind of scenario, but we are looking through at least 700-800 applications minimum each interview season, which is quite a lot of time when you think about it. And that's also the reason why it has to be, or the application has to be on time, because if you're getting that application end of September and then you have to get your interviews out generally within the first week, 2 weeks of October, you got very little time to review all these applications and make your selection.
Awesome. So 800 applications, that's a lot of applications to go through. So I'm assuming it's divided in amongst people, and if so, how?
So yes and no. So each program does it differently, and there's a couple of really cool papers which kind of go through what most programs do, and I'll talk about sort of psychiatry programs, and there's generally a selection committee that reviews applications. There's ways that programs will divide up applications in terms of like there's a grid that you fill out, and based on their personal statement, their letters of recommendation, their transcript, what they did in their fourth year, and then each reviewer kind of fills this grid out, and based on the points you get to the second review, and you go from there. For our program, Dr. Curry, who's the program director, and I will touch every single application. So our chief residents, our faculty will kind of look through the applications and suggest to interview, but that final decision of whether that person is interviewed is myself and Dr. Curry's. So there is not an application that gets interviewed that we have not touched.
But let me rephrase this question. So out of the 800 applications, if a chief resident says, don't interview, do you still see that application?
I still see that application.
Oh, okay. So you basically, so if you have a set criteria, you select 75% of the applications based on that criteria, you're ending up basically at least reviewing through all these applications. Is there a set criteria that, let me see, out of those, let's say 800, are 400 of them that you pay special attention to? And if so, do you select how on that?
Well, I think that we need to break it up. So when you're talking about, say, getting these 1,200 applications, and, within ERAS, there's ways to kind of filter through for like, things like failures, how many years out of residency, and a lot of programs will have very hard limits on how far out of residency you are, et cetera. And so those will filter it down to your 800. Once you get to those 800, then we'll stack them in terms of order of priority, in terms of what matters more. And that very much matters. I know programs that really care about being a gold humanitarian, the GHHS member, because that's a personal priority and a value for the program. And so they'll filter based on that, and then those will get reviewed first. At the end, every application will end up reviewed in some manner or not. And I think the other piece is, the more you do this, the quicker you are at picking out issues within an application. So while it may sound horrible to a med student if I tell them, it takes me like 7 to 10 minutes to review each application and make a decision, because it's like 50 pages that are like their entire life in them. But it really does. Like I'm faster at it. I've been doing it for 4 years, and I know where to hit to find issues, and it does make a difference. And it also makes a difference how the applicant puts the application together, because I don't think they ever see them. So I think if they can get a handle on one of the applicants from their med school and say, hey, can you just print out your ERAS so I can flip through it, so they have an understanding of what the final product is coming to the programs, it'll give them a better way to structure their application.
Beautiful. Yeah, well said. Thank you. I appreciate that. And that's very important. I mean, clearly, if I read a neurology article, I read through it. I mean, I get those details because I have a background knowledge. So do you when you're reading a psychiatry article, right? But if I'm going to read a psychiatry article, it's going to take me longer. So clearly, practice makes perfect. So by the time you doing this for 4 years, are able to do it in a much faster, efficient way, for sure. Now the application itself has multiple structures, right? One is the ERAS application itself, which is the application portion, work experience, etc. Then there are letter of recommendations, then there's personal statement, and then, everything else. So in your opinion, you are taking the application as a whole, and then we're going to come to that one section which is what not to do. So let's not talk about that. But in your situation, let's say on paper, out of 800, 200, the top priority ones are basically looking the same. How do you differentiate between those 200 sort of no's and yeses?
So I think that would be, I don't think 200 applications can look the same. That's not possible. And I think it very much matters in terms of what subspecialty you're looking at. So for psychiatry, the personal statement is by far the top thing that we look at. And it's really hard for personal statements to look the same, even though technically there's a theme to most of them. It's like the hero's journey kind of a scenario. However, they are personal, and how they write really makes a difference. And the other piece that the personal statement does make a difference is to three things that it hits. First is sell yourself and sell yourself for the job, which is one piece of it. How well do you write? Because psych notes are kind of annoying. And if you can't write and you have grammatical errors, and that's another thing that there will be there's a section in there that we're looking at. And I think the other piece of the personal statement is to be able to kind of make it a story about yourself that is attention grabbing to that, but you're highlighting things that you were thinking that a program is looking for. So there's a layer to the personal statement that most PDs, APDs, and psychiatry will be looking for. And it's very hard, even if you're all following the same theme of the hero's journey, they do differentiate just on the personal statement alone.
Glad you said that. I recently made a personal statement and I highlighted this exact thing. Just important that you're not just applying for a training, which is the personal statement. You're applying for a job to make sure that you sell yourself and make sure that you point out the characteristics that you're looking for in a program, and then point it back towards you, stating that, this is why I am the best fit for the job as well. So a little bit of self-plug done in a tactful manner is the way to go for it. I agree 100%.
That was a great humble brag. You were like, here, let me give you an example. And I think that's very particular when it comes to psych, right? I'll see a lot of sort of personal statements that are like, look at my personal trauma. I have a family history of addiction. This is how the trauma has affected me. And there are certain personal statements that I'll be reading, and I'm like, I'm worried about you as a psychiatrist. You don't want to be writing that personal statement. You want to be writing the personal statement that says, this is the difficulty, this is a trial, this is a trauma I went through. However, it has equipped me with empathy. It has equipped me with insight for which I will make a great psychiatric resident or a psychiatrist in the future.
So personal statement. Now let's come to letter of recommendation. A lot of people come to ask me, and how I do a lot of research, and there's a big sort of research, people from Pakistan, Nepal, India, Bangladesh, and they're working on different, review articles. And they come to me and ask me for a letter of recommendation. And I tell them that, hey, it's very important. And correct me if I'm wrong. That's what I'm making assumptions, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong. But my assumption was, number one, you should always ask for a letter of recommendation that you have worked clinically with. Is it important or not? And number two is that people always assume that it has to be from a U.S. doctor. And I thought that it's not that important. I think it's important to have someone who's going to write a good letter of recommendation, who has done direct work with you and is in clinical practice. Are these assumptions correct?
So you have 3 letters that you can assign, and some programs will let you assign more. And so you kind of have to be strategic about that. So I will disagree with the fact that the clinical piece of it, you need a letter for somebody who's worked with you. So if you worked in a research team with somebody and they can speak to your ability to be a hard worker, a team player, energetic, resourceful, initiative, because they can. And those are important values to a program. And that necessarily is not just something a clinical evaluator can write about. That's a research evaluator as well. But this is not a person that's going to be like, I worked with you remotely on an article, and we probably spent like total of 7 hours working together to knock this out. That's not the person you're asking for a letter, because these are not the qualities that they can attest to. The other piece is, if you're asking for a letter from somebody that you feel like they haven't written a lot of letters, feel free to tell them. Say, I'm applying for residency. I'm hoping that you can write me a letter, because I feel like in the time that we work together, I have demonstrated my ability to take initiative, my focus on teamwork, as said by certain examples. Help them write the letter that you need written. Don't write it for them, but say, these are the kind of the things I want written. This is my CV. So really set it up as a med student so that the people can write the best letter. With regards to U.S. versus non-U.S., I will say, if you've got 3, you need a U.S. letter in there if you can get one, because I think that does make a difference in terms of if it's all entirely people who you haven't had any U.S. clinical experience and all. I think that will make a difference. All 3 don't have to be U.S., but if you can get one in, I would try.
Awesome. Good to know. I didn't realize that. And there's a people who are literally working 10 hours at least a week and then have done some powerful work. So that's good to know. And as far as U.S. clinical experience itself, I mean, clearly with the COVID, the situation has changed. But before COVID, was it very important? And after COVID, do you have some of your policies around it, or what's your take on U.S. clinical experience in general for IMG especially?
I think that's a tough question to answer because, and I think that we should remember at this point that I am a psychiatry training director, and psychiatry tends to be a little bit more open-minded, if you will. And so if you're applying to orthopedics, or I'm just picking I don't know how other specialties, so I can't speak to other specialties in that regard. I think that U.S. clinical experience will matter. It's COVID, you can't get it. And therefore, there will be some laxity around it as long as you can, as long as there's some demonstrated effort, or we had planned to do this away and it didn't work out, because that hasn't worked out for U.S. medical students either. I think it does matter from a specialty perspective. And I think picking where the programs that you apply to really does matter. So really when you're building out your application list of these are the programs that I'm applying to, having that sort of range within them so that you have some safety net as well.
Good to know. Now, one last thing on the application. You're reviewing it. It takes you 7 to 8 minutes, and you have a process, where to look for red flags, where to look for good flags. So when you go for good flags, supposedly, green flags, let's just say that, as compared to red flags. So what is the first thing you look for, right? Or
personal statement. Hands down.
Hands down. Okay. So
personal statement, it's both red flags, it's both green flags. The personal statement, what did you do in your 4th year? And the letters of recommendation are one of the first 3 things I'll look at, and the dean's letter. So that'll be, the dean's letter is amazingly important in terms, because that is where 4 years are demonstrated. It's not just a transcript. It's not just like a step 1 score.
So that is the MSPE, correct? Yeah. So MSPE or dean's letter is basically a snapshot of your clinical life prior to application. So number 1 is personal statement. Number 2 is dean's letter / MSPE. Third is a letter of recommendation. And then you're going to go forward so what you're saying is that there's a criteria that ended up you choosing the person. Now you want to know the person rather than look at the scores and all those objective assessments. You first want to know that person, because if you want to get that person in or not, that was already set by the criteria.
Well, the filters for our program are pretty loose, right? Just because, 800-900 applications are downloaded, there's a lot of them that don't get interviewed. So, and that's not where you want to be. You don't want to download 300 applications for 120. That's too few. So you want that range. You want that kind of ability to filter through many applications. And I will say, and this is just a bias here, I'm a foreign graduate. The program director for our program is a DO. And so there's a lot of, we look for DO applicants, we look for IMG applicants, because that's just part of priority for us anyways. And so we do tend to look at a lot of applications. And so you don't get ruled out on that first phase necessarily. That second phase is where people are digging into your application, is where it's rule in or rule out.
Awesome. Good to know. So now let's move to, you selected the 120, you're going to send them invitations. This time it's going to be virtual interviews. And this year, I'm assuming you're going to conduct virtual interviews as well. Yeah. Let's just give me, 5-6 things about the interview itself, especially now in the virtual world, that's so, more importantly, what not to do. And then you come to, okay, this is nice to do, and this is must do.
Be prepared for a virtual interview. And I think that, have a clean background in place. Don't sit on the floor. Don't have your pets jumping into your, all of these have happened. And
pets, okay. Not children.
I know.
It's pets. Oh my God. Yeah. Find a babysitter too, right? That's not hard.
Well,
it's a residency interview.
It's a residency interview. And so internet connections do matter in that time period. So if you are somewhere rural, make sure that you are using your college campus. Go to your university campus. I'm sure there's a library room that you can borrow for the interview, just so you're not worried about the internet bandwidth. You're not worried about any of this. Do a mock interview. Record yourself on Zoom. You can record yourself on Zoom. Because I had one of the applicants last year that I was not an applicant, one of our med students who wanted to do kind of a mock interview. And he kept looking out into the distance. And I was like, what are you doing? And he was like, well, that's how I think. I was like, that doesn't translate in Zoom. Because if you were in person and you were thinking, that makes sense. But if you're on Zoom, it just looks like you wandered away. So there's like the realities, which I think are easier for med students this year, probably because they've spent a year of Zooming, but very much being cognizant of how you come off in Zoom.
And people are shy in general, right? I mean, I'm a remote worker, right? And basically a VP of a digital health company. It's interesting that how people are afraid to just turn on their cameras. And I think in general, they should start doing that so they get into practice around it. So I 100% agree. So that's number one. No is be professional, internet connection, good background, and then make sure that you practice on your Zoom so you understand that the nuances that you feel like in general are your habits and your personality may not translate well. What is good?
So like for those of you watching, did you notice what Dr. Kalia just did? He said, as a VP of, whatever. So that was a humble brag that he kind of slid in there. And that's something you need to get better at in an interview season. You need to say, thank you for that question. You know, I can provide insight into that because my work as whatever. You're also kind of slipping things in a way to make sure that people who maybe haven't read all your entire application thoroughly before they meet you, because not everybody will have, you're slipping those things.
Yep. Beautifully put, self-plug. That is not shameful, but tactful. So it's very important. Thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate it. Now, what is great? Like, what is your greatest interview? Like you said, wow, what a difference. Like what, I mean, I know these are small things, nuances. You're not going to start playing card tricks on it or, do a juggling trick, but still, what would you say is a perfect interview?
I think it is the applicant that cares about psychiatry. One, hands down, psychiatry program directors will care about, do you have a genuine interest in the field? So that person who's energetic, engaged, knows my program, has researched it, and has a pertinent question, which I know seems like not a lot to ask, but it surprisingly is. So that person, and can intelligently speak about it. Because I don't care if you know the DSM-5 on the interview day. That's my job to teach you when you get to the program. Are you a decent, reliable human being that can have good communication skills? I think that matters. And those are not high bars to hit, but it is, people get shy, people get nervous. And so having sort of that banter, that rapport does make a difference.
And team player. I mean, I think you're right. Absolutely. That's the three top skills that I would somehow be able to communicate both in a personal statement and an interview. And clearly, I mean, if you're not interested in the field, it will show up. I can easily guess that, right? I mean, I've done fellowship interviews and I know that, what the hell is he doing here? Is he really interested in New York? Because he doesn't even know how to, sort of understand what the field is about. Yeah. So
that they're on the interview day, the whole interview day. If you're in a breakout room with the program coordinators, you are being interviewed. They may not be interviewing you. If you're sitting there with the residents, you're being interviewed. I remember I was chief resident and I was conducting an interview, we were driving them to lunch, obviously pre-COVID. And one of the applicants started talking about how they had visited Colombia and how they tried these drugs there. And I was like, dude, what are you doing? You're on an interview?
Yeah, you don't, I mean, yeah. Even whatever you feel like, is the perfect person, the chief resident comes out to be a really cool person, please do not declare your indiscretions towards law, especially in international law at all. Yeah, so I agree 100%. So that's another very important trick that she's telling you is that the whole day is an interview day. There is no break. You're being watched, you're being, commented on, and you're being ranked. As a matter of fact, I wasn't the chief resident, but I was the acting sort of stroke fellow. That's why I didn't get into chief residency. But we as chief residents, we did interview. We did get the same grid that she was talking about. We had to mark them on these 5 sort of different skills. And then we had the actual application to review, and that also got points, and we used to submit it back to the residency program director. However, the whole residents, all of them, got the email about feedback when they were at lunch with the other residents, etc. Again, all this was pre-COVID, but don't forget that even in virtual interviews, there are breakout rooms, there are discussions, there are people talking. Make sure you carry yourself with decorum in that. So,
and times to stand out as well, right? If you can connect well with the program coordinators and make small talk appropriately, respectfully, but be engaged, they will remember you. If you can connect with the residents and be thoughtful about the questions you're asking them, they will remember you.
Beautiful. That was a great summary for the interview day. Now, last question. 130 candidates, assuming, 10 dropped off, you got 120, you have to select 12 for the ranking process. How many do you rank? 24, 30?
What? No, about 100 of the 110 get ranked.
So basically, the person that came to the interview ends up being, there's a 90% chance it's going to end up being ranked. So for sure, you're going to get ranked. Now the question is, okay, and that generally, I don't know. So you basically rank within the first top 20, 30 choices, especially University of Arizona, correct? No,
20, 30 choices is not. So you have to think of the rank list in terms of top 1 to 12 is basically number 1. Right? So we have 12 spots. So first 12 is number 1 spot. And so generally we end up like mid-list, usually. Yeah. And that's where most programs are going to go, like mid-list. Very rarely do you end up going now in psychiatry because psychiatry is such a hot field.
Correct.
I remember when I was resident that we were not that hot. And so we would go deeper into the list. And I think it does kind of matter which specialty you're applying to. And I don't think you can worry too much about the rank list as an applicant or as a program because it's in the hands of the match gods. And really, there's not a lot of like, do they like me? Do they not like me? We don't play that game at U of A in terms of do they really care about Arizona? Do they really like us? Like, if we like you, we're going to rank you where we want to put you. And we're not going to try to read your minds because we don't have a psychic powers there. And that, I think, takes a lot of pressure off of us in that regard as well. And it takes a lot of pressure off the applicants in terms of trying to be like, we do like you, we don't like you, because we don't want to add that to med students. They have enough pressures on their life.
No, I agree, 100%. Like, and that's what advice I gave one of. Like, there are people who wanted, you're such a good mentor, I want to rank your program. I said, bullshit. You want to rank the one that you think is the best program. It doesn't matter where one person exists or one other exists. And there could be multiple reasons. And one of the reasons is family, right? I ranked it because of family. So it's all right. Whatever your reasoning is, you rank because of your reasoning, because your social support system matters, because these are tough jobs to do as far as that is concerned. So that's number one. But number two, now when you're saying, like, let's say 130, you're ranking about 100, how do you then rank them, like from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6?
That's a good question. I think each matters who the residency selection committee is, because generally each program will kind of do it differently. So a lot of programs will just do the PDs and their small residency selection committee that'll sit down and go through every applicant and decide, and that they'll decide based on how they did on interview, what feedback, what sort of written feedback they get after interviews, because each interviewer will have to fill it out for you, what the resident said, what the program coordinator said, what was their application like. And you take the whole thing into account and you do it. And the residency selection committee is generally what varies across programs in terms of being a super small or super big. So that'll vary in terms of how many people get a voice. And then that's kind of where you put the ranking together. Because the other piece is the reason why a lot of people will put residents to interact with the applicants is because people change. Very few applicants are going to be rude to my face as the associate training director, but the inappropriate behavior or the professionalism lapses tend to show up around program coordinators, around residents, where they feel like where it slips out. And so that's why that feedback is valued and taken into account. The residency selection committee generally tends to take all of this together and then say, this is what we really like. These are the values of the program, because it does matter in terms of what your program values are. And that's why there generally tends to be a core committee that understands that perspective you're in.
So you said that, at the end of the day, once the person is selected to the interview, there's generally going to be ranked. As far as the ranking is concerned, you're taking about a pool of opinions, and it's more about how they conducted themselves throughout the day on the interview day, if there were any lapses in professionalism, and then you rank them with one major criteria. The value of the applicant matches the value of the program. And that's what you're looking for as far as, when you're physically ranking them in terms of 1 to 10 or 1 to 200. Is that correct?
Yeah. I think the perspective doesn't become, oh my God, you had a beautiful step 2 score, so you get number 1 on the rank list. Like, that will not generally matter after you've done sort of the interview day. It will matter, are you a good fit Do you match the values of this program or not? And I think asking after those values does matter, especially if you have a bunch of interviews lined up back to back. So asking a chief resident, if you're interviewing with them, saying, what do you think the values are that most of the trainees in this program exhibit? Because the chief resident will generally be like, we really care about leadership, we really care about advocacy, we're community focused, whatever it is. And then using that knowledge to continue with your interviews and say, one of the values that really matters to me is leadership or advocacy or community work. And these are how I've demonstrated that value in the last 4 years of med school. And really using that interview day to make sure that you are having a successful interview day, because the residents are going to be very blunt and honest with you. So use that and play that back into the interviews when you can. And that will affect how well you do.
Awesome. That's perfect. That's a very good insight that you just, like, within talking to different people, you're going to get a sense. I mean, let's say even if you didn't get to the chief resident, while having a casual interview, let's say we're doing it, you're going to understand, like, the questions even they're asking the other interviews, you're going to feel like, why are they asking this question as compared to that question? You're going to get the feel of the overall value of the program. So keep an eye on that, so that at least if the first interview is not going well, you pick up on those points and do better on the second interview. That's really good to know.
Will help you. So the program website will generally have like a comment from the program director or like a quick couple of paragraphs on it, and that'll help you understand what it is the program is after or what the values of the program are. And so if you read that the night before, you might be able to be more focused.
So 2 more questions. That is, like, give me 5 examples of stupid behavior, and so that they can avoid that categories. And then, because you can't cover all of my stupid behavior, so let's just forget about that. Just give me big 5 that I did wrong. Just use me as an example.
Do not interrupt. And I think that's hard on Zoom, because in Zoom, you feel like the person is done talking or whatever. And so just acknowledge that. Call that out in the room and see, like, it's really hard not to interrupt on Zoom, to feel like how that's happening. So I apologize if I do that. Because you're nervous as a med student. You really want to make your point, but you also don't want to interrupt. And so being comfortable with calling that out and say, I really don't want, I'm sorry if it comes off as I'm interrupting, but I can't sometimes tell how it's happening on Zoom. You've already gained sort of the trust, and you've brought together something common between you and the interviewer. But I find a lot of applicants will interrupt a lot, and that's kind of annoying sometimes. I'm the associate training director, so I really do care that you care about my program. Like, so you care about psychiatry and you care about my program. And so not having read up about the program sometimes is annoying, but it's not terrible. And I think just basic things in terms of like Zoom etiquette or like looking up, looking down, like that really does make a difference in terms of how you make a connection. So you have to be thoughtful about how you're making a connection in that time period. So I think those criteria will kind of let you think about things to avoid.
I'm going to make a video about it. It's going to be 3 simple steps. You can look fantastic on Zoom and how to do it. Cam Hauser, who's been doing it, is going to help me with it. So that's one of the things that are coming. Keep going. Sorry about that.
Yeah. And look at that. Another plug. Gently done. But those are skills you need to bring in.
Now, I feel bad for, including me, right? I mean, I had some red flags on my CV, which I believe did hold me back a little bit. And I know personally quite a few people who has at least 1 or 2 red flags and that had some difficulty. What is the best way, in your opinion, to work around it or to approach the programs in a tactful, decent manner that can bring a little more attention to their application without sounding, as you're saying, blatantly, interruptive?
I think med students don't have a perspective on what a program will consider a red flag. So I've had med students approach me and be like, Dr. Kalia, I had this one elective that didn't work out. Is it going to be a red flag? And I'm like, that's not a red flag. Like, a red flag is a failure, or you didn't match last year and something happened. So I think having a clean perspective of what is a red flag, and I would really listen to your deans on that, because your deans have a better perspective on what is a red flag. And then I would talk to the deans and mentors that you have available to you in the med school and say, is this a red flag? Is this a red flag? And if it is, how do I proceed? Because each kind of has to have a different approach to it. And I think depending on what it is, right? Like you're saying, I took an extended leave of absence in my second year of med school. Do I need to explain that? And I think you kind of, depending on the time frame and what happened, you might need to explain that in your personal statement. You might need to address that at some point in your application. And there's various points. So I think in the red flag perspective, really listen to the people who have the perspective will help.
Let me give you an example. So a person fails there's no CS anymore. So let's say fails step 3. And assuming one of the program has a criteria not to interview, what should he or she do?
This is hard because I think the traditional advice is to say, reach out to the program coordinators and say, hey, this is what happened. And would you please let the program directors know that I'm interested in the program, and if they would consider reviewing my application, that would be great. I think the other piece is realizing that there is a lot of communication that we get from applicants, and sometimes it's just overwhelming. And so really, I would suggest if you have a point to make, I would, communicate to the program, not just like, hey, hello, nice to meet you. Like, don't do just random communications. If you have a point to make, do that. And I think communication pre and post is very important to discuss as well. So what we do in the University of Arizona Tucson program will be like, please, you don't need to send me thank you cards. If you want to, that's fine. If it helps you feel better, like it's not going to make a difference to me in terms of ranking you up and down. And we were very clear about that to the med students because there's so much mixed messaging they'll get about the thank you cards. And so we just go ahead and tell you. I would suggest that if you are worried about communication post-interview, just ask the chief resident and ask a resident. Be like, hey, what do you guys prefer? And does it make a difference? And I don't know, and I can't speak for programs, obviously, at large, but if that would be a way to figure that out. And I think in that scenario, you can reach out to the program coordinators and try, but not have,
But thank you emails are important, right? I'm assuming?
No. Personally, I don't care.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, technically.
Because like they came to my program to interview. Obviously they care. And so I think for me, it doesn't really make a difference if I heard from them again, if I didn't hear from them again, because very much I'm not going to track that because, I don't have enough brain space to track all of this information. I'm not going to track if they responded to me. I'm not going to track if they wrote a thank you email. So if I'm not going to track that, if I'm not going to value that, then why does it matter? Agreed.
So,
but if
going back, going back, like, let's say, like, I know a person, let's say, X, very good, did really hard work, had one mishap that is basically, following the poor guy along. How can I, as a mentor, then make a difference? Can we send an email on his behalf? Does that matter?
I think that does matter. I think definitely if you have mentors or you have personal connections with programs and they're willing to reach out to certain programs on your behalf, definitely matters.
What is the best way? Should I just email you or pick up the phone?
No.
Email you.
Email is generally the best way. And I think that, and again, done appropriately matters. And I don't think you should be asking your mentors to email like 40 programs on your behalf. I think it works when the mentor has a personal connection and says, hey, this is somebody I've worked with. They're very hardworking, except they graduated 4 years ago. And it's been a while since they've done any training. And so would you please, take a look at their application and review them? Because the most a mentor can do is make sure your application gets reviewed. Then the application has to stand on its own merit in comparison. And the comparison kind of is where it gets tough, is because some of these applications, man, I don't think I would match into Psych now.
Yeah, exactly now. And just for the one thing that people should know, I am exclusively paying more to psychiatrists than to neurologists, internal medicine, and they are reaching, in my company at least, the pay of ICU physicians, the telepsychiatrist. It is amazing to be a psychiatrist today, FYI. Last 3 things. 3 words that describe you, Ms. Kalia.
I don't know. I didn't think about this.
So there are 3 things that we always do. So I asked 3 things you recommend reading, 3 people that you should, recommend coming on this podcast, and 3 words to describe you. So let's start with the reading list. 3 things that you think that everyone should read in their life.
The Charisma Myth. It's an Olivia Fox-Cobain book. It's a good book, and I think it would be probably a good book to kind of read around the interview season as well. Deep Work by Cal Newport, because it's really hard to do deep work in this kind of world that we live in. And then this one that I haven't quite finished, but I'm reading through right now. It's called The Power of Moments, Why Certain Experiences Have Extraordinary Impact. And Granted, I'm a psychiatrist, and moments are kind of part of what you do in psychotherapy or in training and in education. And so I think those three I would consider.
Okay. And 3 words that describe you.
Loyal, irreverent.
True. And I can say that. I'm her brother. And patient. I think you have been an amazingly patient person. I wouldn't be as patient and some of those things that you are patient with. And just for the achievement perspective, I have Dani and Inaya. They're my nephew and niece from my sister, and I love them. So that's definitely one of her greatest achievements, if I'm not one. So, yes.
We're not one. But yeah, my daughter, my 5-year-old daughter said to me a few days ago, she's like, Mama, the cuteness of the clothes is important, but it has to be comfortable as well. And yeah, that's not a perspective that you get from a 5-year-old. And this morning she said to me before she left, she's like, I love you, but I also like you. I'm like, it takes adults to figure out that separation.
Yep, it does. Absolutely. And she is fantastic and amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time. We will probably do this again near the interview season, just to do a 15-minute recap for the interview if you have time at that point. Again, very grateful. If anyone wants to follow Saira Kalia, go to Arizona. Do not follow her at all.
I'm not a social media person. You're not going to, I'm not going to be like, I don't want a bunch of med students across the U.S. saying, well, I'm going to follow this associate PD and I'm going to get into the psychiatry residency program. Not going to work.
There you go. Don't follow her. But do check out her publications, especially some of the videos on the Arizona website, especially, as I said, perimaternal psychiatric complications. She has perinatal
psychiatry, which, by the way, is the bomb. So if you want to do psych, you should be very interested in women's mental health. Definitely. So keep that in mind.
There you go. Do that. Make sure you check out her videos on the Arizona University website. Thank you very much again. Grateful for your time.
Pleasure.
If you save a life, it is as if you saved the life of mankind. Please make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel and my newsletter. If you want to get in touch with me, the best way is to go through Twitter or via LinkedIn. Also, make sure you follow the Academy website for regular updates. Thank you so much.